All right, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to this another episode of Life-Undeferred Open Mic. We're going to have a really interesting discussion today. Glad you're joining us. Happy New Year, by the way. First episode of Open Mic for the new year. And just, again, quick little backstory on this show, if you want to call it that. I was a victim to identity theft back in December, about a month ago, and kind of lost two of my biggest platforms and kind of feel like there's FOMO. Like I feel like a kid who lost his puppy. Like I don't know what to do. I don't know how to connect with people in my audience. And so people like me kind of enjoy just chatting it up. So I was like, let's just do these live streams and connect with cool people and have really fun, engaging conversations. So that's what this is. So a little bit of an agenda today. Got a very special guest, but really hope that your 2025 is treating you well. I'm going into this year with my keyword for this year is uncomfortable. Like some people sometimes have a theme going into a year. Mine is uncomfortable. I have been very uncomfortable in the last month, especially since since losing two of my biggest platforms, jumping into entrepreneurship, quitting my W-2 job in July. And how to build this business and this platform without two of my biggest social media channels. But that's how we grow and expand. I think that's why so many people never reach the next level in life many times, because we avoid being uncomfortable. And that's how I lived my life for so many years. And if we're never uncomfortable, we never get a chance to really reach the next level, whether that's business, finances, fulfillment, purpose, the whole bit. So all of my talks really are how do we unlock the next level? How do we, what's the cheat code? What's the key that can get us to the next level in our life? And that's what we're going to talk about here today. So I want to bring on a very special guest, good friend of mine, Minnesotan, fellow author, fellow Amazon best-selling author, Dr. Ashley Rath. Welcome to the show here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
So how does it feel? How does it feel to have a best-selling author next to your name?
It's crazy. It's like a pinch me moment. This is so fresh and so new still, just like you, right? Like you just launched a little over a month ago.
Yeah.
I launched on New Year's. Yeah. New Year's Eve. And so I'm still feeling all the things, grateful, in awe, excited. And yeah, I can't wait for what 2025 has to bring. So Happy New Year.
Yeah, you too. So the name of the book is Love Yourself and Your Life. Did I get that right? Or did I mix up the two words?
You flopped them, but that's okay.
I was like, I'm not going to do that. And sure enough, I did. So love your life and yourself. What's the subtitle, and give us a little synopsis as to what it's all about?
So it's a modern mom's guide to happiness, health, and resilience. And really, I wrote this book for women. I mean, I've been working with women for the last 10 years in my practice, and this is my real raw stories that I have learned in my life and through motherhood and through marriage and through business. And I've just taken those stories and stories with my patients and cultivated them into this self-development, self-help book to be able to help so many more women out there be able to thrive through motherhood and through owning a business and motherhood, or working and motherhood and being a wife, and really to be able to get healthy, get more resilience. So have your threshold be higher, like you can manage that stress in a very healthy way. And honestly, just to have more joy. And so the book is just filled with so many tips and tools, and very, very near and dear stories to my heart as well. So it's very raw and real, as a mother would be.
That's awesome. We're gonna get into some of the book here today, more specifically accountability and responsibility. But what is it about mothers or motherhood that really gets people stuck? I can't obviously speak from experience. I've seen it with my wife, obviously, and a mother of four. But from your perspective and the way that you've, the people that you've helped, what is it about motherhood specifically that gets people tripped up and locked in?
I think the biggest thing is them feeling like they have to do it all, to have it all or be it all. I think there's this like comparison game that we play all the time, and social media has really amplified that. Where we're like, oh my gosh, I should be doing this, or I should be doing that, or look at their life, and you start to play this comparison game as a mom, when really, like, if you just look at your life and what you're doing, girl, like, you're doing the best that you can do, but you're probably crushing it, especially if you're having those feelings.
Yeah.
And yeah, going back to social media, like, social media is it's a great platform, but it also is very, can be a time suck, but B, a like dart to the heart. When you start comparing and having and really living people's greenest lives, it's not reality. Most people aren't sharing the shit, as I say.
Yeah. It's true. And that feeling of comparison I can experience as a guy. The time suck is definitely there. It's inevitable that we, like, for some reason we think it's us against them. And the more that I can get in my head, it's just really, again, it's not even me against me. It's me against this current version of me. And that's not even a fight. It's not even a fight. It's just it's a journey of expansion. When you view it like that, to me, that grip of imposter syndrome and comparison starts to melt away. Is that what you've seen in your life?
Yeah, 100%. And you're speaking from like the top comparison gal there is. If you've ever done, I don't know if you're familiar, but the Strength Finders test. So I've done that test multiple times, and one of my top 5 strengths is competitiveness. And the root of competitiveness is actually comparison. And so I am 100% guilty. And I don't know if that makes me the worst person to talk about this, or maybe the best, because I can relate. But I am 100% guilty of comparing. And really, my worst critic is myself. Like, I compare to others, but when this can be of advantage to you, when it becomes a strength, like they talk about, is when you use it for motivation instead of shaming or guilting yourself into it. So I'm not necessarily judging other people of where they're at or where they are, but that strength also has a weakness of comparison and judging myself of where I should be. And I think that's really important to note, is like, it's not necessarily always a bad thing, but we can use it to our power. I would say majority of people aren't doing that, including myself at times. But I think there is this like double-edged sword of it, is like, you can use that to propel you forward.
Yeah. I was going to use that verbiage, double-edged sword, to describe what you just said. I've heard it said too, like, if you get like a room full of millionaires in the room who are like insanely successful, and ask them like, how many of you feel inadequate and like you're just not really doing what you should be doing in life, that almost all of them will raise their hands. So like, they have this incredible feeling of inadequacy, but also too, like, they know that there's something in there that they need to unlock, which again is kind of like a double-edged sword. So it's like that drive of like wanting more is kind of tied to the feeling of inadequacy, but it has to be used in the right context. If it brings on shame, as you know, that is not that's not the state of being that we need to be tied in.
No, not helpful.
Yeah. Let's transition to like, the topic at hand here today. I asked you before we did this show, I was like, out of your book, like, I'm really trying to like, let's just get right to the heart. Like, it's 2025. I want this year to be like a breakthrough, unrecognizable year for people. Like, what is one thing out of your book that will just like cut to the heart? And you said like this idea of like responsibility. Like, where do you want to start with this one? We could go down the road of accountability, of choosing, of understanding that we are in charge of the results in our life. How would you articulate kind of where we should start this conversation?
Yeah, so really in my chapter, I call it 100% responsibility, 0% responsibility. And I learned this from one of my dearest coaches, Demi, her name is. I love her. And I was really, we were in a spot in our marriage where I was like pointing the finger at Tyler all the time, who is my husband. And she kind of like bluntly but lovingly was like, Ashley, like if you keep blaming him for your marriage and not taking some responsibility, like you're never going to be happy. And it was like this absolute of you are either 100% responsible or 0% responsible. And the 0% responsibility only comes in very few moments when you are a victim to certain things, like your identity, like not your responsibility, but now it is your responsibility to be able to manage and grow from that challenge. And in the book, I give the example of, I'm going to be just very vulnerable with you right now, but like I was sexually assaulted in college. And I go through like the whole story of like what happened and how I felt and how I had so much guilt and shame. And realizing like that incident, I was 0% responsible for that. However, now I need to take 100% responsibility for my life and how I move forward from that incident or from that challenge or from that breakthrough. And yes, that is an extreme example, but going back to my marriage, like during harvest season or during planting, we're farmers, or he farms full time. And he's gone a lot. And so I kept on blaming him for our crappy marriage and miscommunication and him being gone all the time. And when we see our life, and if we experience our life from the outside in, how circumstances, whether that's your spouse or world events or the new elected president or who you wanted to be elected or politics or really anything from the outside, if that is controlling and coordinating your behavior and how you respond, you're not being 100% responsible for your life. Essentially, you need to take 100% responsibility of how you respond to them, because really, most of the things we experience, we cannot control. It is out of our control. And that's where perfectionism and control freaks are miserable, is because they expect this outside world to do exactly what their brain thinks it should do. And when that person, spouse, kids, work, colleague, etc., doesn't do that, well, then they're pissy and crabby and they live this very, very unfulfilled, unhappy, mad life, and they keep pointing the finger. So I think part of it is conscious, but a lot of that, it becomes unconscious. We start just pointing the fingers. Oh, it's just because this person was elected, or it's just because, that world event happened, or COVID, like all the things that we can continue to point our fingers at, that we actually are 100% responsible, not necessarily for the event happening, but our response to it.
Yeah, 100%. I love that analogy, because it leaves no wiggle room. Because here's a thought. If you leave wiggle room, like it's kind of it's their problem, they're the problem. Essentially, what you're saying is that like what am I trying to say here? If you don't take responsibility for it, now all of a sudden you're taking away your ability to choose. Like the first chapter of my book is you get a choice. Like at the end of the day, it's like a fundamental thing. You have to understand that you have a say in this life. I cannot think of anything more disempowering for people is when you take away their ability to choose. To your point, every external circumstance, we may not have choice, but we do have a say in how we act or react to that. I've even said in our household, I want to hear your response to this. Like if you've got a problem with X, Y, and Z in this house, or whomever, or whatever event, like you just said, and that triggers you, that's a you problem. That's a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people. What's been your reaction as you've brought this to people through your book and through your practice?
Yeah. So I think initially it's a little bit of pissed offness, like, what is their fault? I see this I would say mostly in marriages, or parents with older children in their teenage years, where they, I would say, have less control over their actions and words that they say. So I see this, I would say, mostly in those two categories. And the first is like, but they did this. It's like this entitlement of like, but they're doing this to me. And it's not that they're not, sometimes there is like they're being malicious, or they aren't making good choices. And I 100% agree with them. But the only thing, just like you said, is we have a choice of how we're going to respond to that. And we can match them and that behavior and that energy, or we can level up and decide we can make that choice of, I'm going to take responsibility of my actions and my feelings and my thoughts. And really, it actually starts with thoughts, because our thoughts create a feeling. And then that feeling creates an action. And then the action also actually creates the results. And inaction is still action. So if you want a different result, the only thing you can control is the thoughts of how you respond to that. And then that will give you a different feeling.
That's super. Man, we could go down several roads on that, and I don't disagree. I love that, because I do believe like your life is a result of how you think. So to me, that's like the ultimate linchpin. I mean, Romans 12:2 says you were transformed by the renewing of our mind. Like that's like the ultimate cheat code. Like if you really want to transform your life, transform how you think. I want to hear your opinion on this, because this is something that's kind of I want to say learning, but it's becoming more real for me. I'm starting to believe less and less in like the random chaos of the world. Like it's just the world is chaotic and it's all going to heck in a handbasket. And here I am, just trying to survive in this crazy world. I'm seeing things happen. Again, to your point, people that trigger me, perhaps my spouse, I can't talk too loud because she's over there, or my children. And I'm realizing that those things, those people, are not there by chance, that they're actually there by what you could say divine structure and intentionality for me to expose something inside of me that needs to get changed. How would you articulate or explain that little manifesto, or do you even agree with that?
I 100% agree. I think like when people say that was a coincidence, I say that was actually planned. That was there. That was supposed to happen. And I couldn't agree more. I think we are energetic beings, and the level that this is going to go probably a little bit deeper, but the level that you essentially are vibrating at is what you will see. So when you brought up millionaires, like it's a different vibration than someone who is in poverty and maybe homeless. Like they may see different opportunities, the opportunities that show to that person, or show themselves to that person. That person, depending on the state they're at, may or may not be able to see those opportunities, or even vice versa. Someone who is in like a pure enlightenment joy, they may see, quote, bad things happen in the world, but it doesn't affect them. And that same person standing next to them may be at a different vibrational frequency and see that same thing happen and think the world is going to end tomorrow and all the most worst things in the world are going to happen. And see, the thing is perception, but what you perceive is also how you perceive it is going to be based on the energetic level or your consciousness is another word for it, your level of consciousness and where you are at. And I also want to note on that is like, you're not just in one state at one time, you're a fluid being. So that consciousness level will go up and down as your essentially mood changes. And you will know if you're at a higher level consciousness. If you're feeling fear, anxiety, shame, you're down here and you're going to see more fear, more shame, more anger, more things to feed that. When you're in a higher level consciousness up here, like joy, love, enlightenment, well, you're going to also see more of those things as you travel on your path. So I absolutely agree with you that nothing is coincidental. I think everything is aligned, and the universe knows exactly what it's doing at 100% of the time. And I think when we say bad, really, from my learning, especially from Abraham Hicks, she talks about contrast and how if we didn't have contrast, we wouldn't really know what feels good or what doesn't feel good. And she doesn't even say good or bad. She calls it contrast because depending on the level of, again, consciousness that you're at, you will be able to feel more of that level depending on which level you're at and see it and perceive it. And that's the thing. We live our life through perception of our reality. How can one person see, I always give the analogy of a snake. How can one person see a snake and have elation and curiosity and like, oh, that's beautiful. And another person like myself get like in the worst or the worst sympathetic mode where my heart rate goes up, my blood pressure increases, and I'm going to like sprint out of the room. Our perception of that snake is very, very different. And the same goes to any sort of experience you have, whether that's within the household, within work, within your marriage, within finances. The way you perceive it is how you will live your life through that.
You as you were explaining that, I was like, she's talking about consciousness, and then you actually defined it as consciousness as well. I think as we grow and as I grow and evolve, my level of consciousness goes up, and it's not intelligence, it's how I perceive the world. So I 100% track with you. Let me ask you a question. So like we're talking about taking responsibility, 100% responsibility over, it's either 0 or 100. Either like we are fully responsible or we have no responsibility in that external circumstance. What comes first? Do we have to work on taking the responsibility, then the consciousness goes up, or do we change our consciousness and then as a byproduct, we become more aware that we are responsible? How would you answer that question?
That's a good question. And really, I think the way I've learned to increase consciousness, I don't know whether the chicken or the egg, to answer your question. I'm not sure if it's the chicken or the egg or both, but the easiest and fastest way that I have learned to be able to raise your consciousness is to do the things that feel good. If it doesn't feel good, well, we have to change something. So if you're having thoughts of fear or anxiety, well, if we catch that thought very early on, think of like momentum. So our thoughts have momentum, just like a car going down a hill has momentum. So if that car starts rolling, think like San Diego, right? Or like San Fran, where there's hills. If you can kind of nudge your body against it right when it starts rolling down the hill, you could probably stop that car. But if you try to stop that car at the bottom of the hill with those momentum, anxious thoughts, you're not going to be able to stop them very easily or not at all. And so when we start to have these thoughts, and if we want to change an emotion, we actually have to back up and start with our thoughts, because the thoughts will create an emotion. And so the fastest way to change that is by doing things that feel good. And sometimes it's not even on the same topic. So let's say you're anxious about, I don't know, money. Money coming in. You don't know where your next, gig is going to come from, or clients or patients, or, whatever it is. And you keep having these negative thoughts about it. Well, you're probably not going to solve the problem. Actually, I know you're not going to solve the problem with those thoughts of fear and anxiety. And sometimes we have to like completely shift of what we're thinking about. So like not even think about money, but think about like, wow, that tree is absolutely beautiful. The hoarfrost on it this morning was stunning. And you start thinking about like what is good. So you've stopped the thought pretty early on. And that's how you can start to raise your consciousness, is starting to become aware of when those low consciousness level thoughts are coming in and change them as quickly as possible. And the awareness is key. So everything, to be able to raise your consciousness, you have to start to becoming aware of when they're coming up. And to do that, if you just don't feel good, you're not in that high consciousness level. And when you do feel good, you are there. And you can increase it. It'll be easier to get momentum, even to increase it up to a higher level of consciousness.
That's some deep stuff, and I love how you explain that. I'm gonna throw a curveball at you, but let me preface it with this. So, like, here's kind of where we are today, and I've heard it explained. This is somebody else's verbiage, so just don't tear me apart on my theology or how I'm explaining. This is how I explain. So this is where you are today. Like, this is your state of being, your level of consciousness right here. Above you, now don't get all like quirky jerky on me here, but like above you is like your highest self, like you, like at a more higher level of consciousness. Your state of being is elevated, it's expanded. Okay, follow me so far?
Yep.
When you are uncomfortable, whether done from an external circumstance, or here's even better, where you manually create uncomfortable, I won't say feelings, but like where you're being stretched, giving generously without knowing when and if it's going to come back. Cold plunging, which is a very uncomfortable thing. From what I understand, I don't do it. Don't really have a lot of motive to do it or a desire to do it. But like working out, for example, working out is uncomfortable. You know what I'm saying? But I've heard it said every moment that you are in that uncomfortable state, where you do the thing, where you forgive, where you choose to not let old programs dictate how you interact with your spouse or your children or a coworker or a potential client, you are now spending time with that higher self, and it is expanding yourself into that person. I'm not suggesting I disagree with that. I have to process a little bit more on that. But to your point, you said, do what feels good. But to get to the point where it actually feels good, it's not going to feel good right away. Right?
Correct.
Okay. Well, so explain that dichotomy there.
Yeah. So the thing is, let's just take working out, for example. Some working out really normally doesn't feel good, especially if you're like at the end of, lifting weights, you're at that last rep, you're trying to push through, like your body, everything in your body is telling you quit, right? Like you're done. But when you push through those limits, how does the body feel afterwards? So sometimes it's the reward in which we're going to get after we plunge through. So I've been doing cold plunges now for the last couple months. And I'm telling you, it's not like rainbows and unicorns for the first second. But I can tell you how I feel about 20 minutes after I've warmed up, how I feel afterwards. And it's the reward is you feel so energized, you feel great. But those first probably, I would say, 10 seconds of you going in, every part of your being wants to get out. It's in a survival mode. I remember the very first time I did a cold plunge. My brain told me, get out, you're going to die. Like literally, it told me I was going to die because, a season, like as a chiropractor, I've gone through a lot of school and done like first aid and, CPR, and you talk about hypothermia, and like, that's where my brain instantly went. Like, you're going to get hypothermia and you're going to die. And realistically, I knew I was only going to be in there for a couple minutes. I was going to be fine. I just needed to relax and like, just withstand the uncomfortableness for a bit. And so when I talk about feeling good, there are phases or stages that you do have to go through for a small chunk to be able to get that reward. However, we can also pre-frame this. So as I've been doing cold plunges more, this has gotten easier and easier and easier for me to do. I can hop in a cold plunge pretty easily, and it's not really that uncomfortable anymore. Unless it's like -30 outside, then it's still pretty uncomfortable, but that's uncomfortable regardless if you're going in a cold plunge or not. But it has gotten significantly easier. And why is that? That fear, right? Like that was the first time I jumped in. There was still fear there that I was going to die. I mean, it was a split second, a half a second, or a quarter of a second thought, but that thought was still there. And I know now with the experiences, A, I'm not going to die. B, it's going to be slightly uncomfortable, but for a very short time. And if I can reframe my thoughts and correct my breathing structure, it's actually not that intolerable sitting in there for a couple minutes. Now, if I focus on how my body feels and all the coldness and all the ickiness that comes with a cold plunge, or what people would say, yeah, it's going to be miserable for those 2 minutes. But again, my perception of it, how I perceive the cold plunge as beneficial, as like when I jump into that, I know I am doing my body good. And so that is what I focus on instead of focusing on possibly the uncomfortableness that my body is experiencing.
So tie that back to the first example you gave at the beginning of this conversation. You said most women have issues with perhaps relationships, many times their spouse, based on a preconceived programming, whatever, I mean, something that doesn't even have to do with their husbands. And again, that goes both ways, and certainly parents and children, right? So in a parallel example, because of your programming, you want to react or treat your spouse a certain way that really isn't their fault. That's a you problem, right? And so in that moment, it won't feel right or good, but you choose not to react, act out of love or whatever. And if you do that enough, just like with the cold plunges, like that feeling starts to change, and it goes from being uncomfortable to more comfortable. And as a result, my level of consciousness and awareness goes up. Did I connect the dots fairly, or what am I missing?
No, absolutely. You totally connected the dots. And I think that is huge to kind of relate back to something that most of us see every day in our lives, which is our relationship with our spouse or maybe our kids. And, I just think about, going back to the consciousness. And so let's say that in your brain, you think like, well, it's his fault. He doesn't do anything in the house, or he doesn't pick up, or, he always does this, or, you can insert whatever, or she doesn't do this, or she doesn't do that, or I'm always having to do this, and it's not 50-50 in the house. And so you can have those thoughts, but every time you start that thought process again, remember, as soon as you have, I'm so frustrated with him, he never cleans the dishes up, that thought is the thought you need to start becoming aware of. It's that initial thought and that perception of it, and switching it to like, okay, I'm going to take 100% responsibility. And instead of playing these things in my head for 45 minutes while he sits there and has no idea that these thoughts are going on in your head, I'm going to take responsibility and be like, hey, Ty, do you mind helping me with the dishes for a couple minutes? It would really help me out. And using my voice and taking responsibility. And how he responds is, again, like I know some relationships are like, he's just going to say no. And that's like a whole nother can of worms. But when I take responsibility of my thoughts, express how I feel, let him respond, and then I can respond. I think that's huge. Also, when we start to become aware of those thoughts, as soon as they happen, your consciousness is going to stay at a higher level. I guarantee you, this is like science all over it. The higher consciousness level that you are, more people will start to raise up to that level. And it's most important within the household. And sorry for this, Jared, but women actually hold the energy of the household. So mom actually holds the energy of that household. So moms, if your energy is not at a high consciousness level and you want your family to respond better to you, I guarantee if you become a higher level thinker and doer and consciousness level person, your family will start to follow that. Your kids will start to, your spouse will start to, they'll realize there is a different energy in the house. And that's literally where it changes, where you start taking 100% responsibility, where I'm going to raise my consciousness, and I guarantee everyone else in your household will raise theirs too.
Yeah. I love that. And I don't disagree with you, because when the wife is not in a good state of being, we all can feel it. And not to suggest that I don't have some ability to affect the atmosphere in our home either. That's certainly not what you're saying. But I connect with that, and I think that should be a challenge. We'll start to land this plane, but like, let that be a challenge for people listening. Like, again, it comes back to the very first thing we're talking about. You get a say, you get a choice. And I live in a world, or I choose to have it the perception, I live in a world where I get a say. And I feel my level of consciousness goes down when I don't feel that I have a say. And that has been probably the biggest stark contrast between me today and me 3 years ago, was that idea of I get a choice in my life. And it's such an empowering stance. So I think that there is something so powerful in the topic at hand here today. Beginning of 2025, you've kind of given people like some tools, some things to think about, like what's maybe like another nugget or something we haven't talked about with regards to choice, responsibility, accountability that people can take and actually start executing it in their house today.
Buy my book. You'll get all the tips and tools.
Well, that's a given. Yeah, no, I hear you. What else?
No, I'm serious. There is so much packed into it. It's 273 pages long. It has so many tools, so many tips, so many actionable things that you can do today if you just implement it. And I can tell you, like, just going back to responsibility, I would say the one thing you could do is put a stake in the ground and decide that 2025, just like Jared said, you get to choose, and you also are 100% responsible for that choice. You get to have 100% responsibility of how 2025 plays out. Yes, shit things are going to happen to you. Sorry, excuse my language. They do. That's just how life goes. Crappy things happen to really, really good people. I don't know why. But I do know that we can learn from those. So you have a choice, and that choice is your responsibility to take. And the moment you start becoming responsible for those choices, for your outcome, that's when life changes.
Man, I love that. I love that. And that's especially when you connect to the spiritual side. They're really, if you can, because really freedom and choice is a very spiritual concept. And then all of a sudden, like it opens up the door for so many other things. So I couldn't agree more and challenge people to make that claim and plant that stake in the ground, like Ashley said. By the way, I'll try to bleep that out. If I get kicked off of LinkedIn because of you, is that considered my choice or your choice? I get this is the only one I got left. It's the only one that's left.
No,
it's
sorry.
It's all
you
good.
Can bleep it out.
I'll try to bleep it out before this airs. We'll see. Let's land this plane. So your book, give the name, subtitle again, where people can find it.
You can find it on Amazon. It's called Love Your Life and Yourself, A Modern Mom's Guide to Happiness, Health, and Resilience.
I love it. Go check it out at Amazon.com. Best-selling author, Dr. Ashley Rath, joining us today. And enjoy your rest of your day. Thanks for your time today. I love this. Great conversation.
Thank you, Jared.
We'll do a part 3 and 4, 5, and 6 after this at some point. So
awesome.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
We'll see you next time.
See ya.
All right. I hope you enjoyed this fireside chat with Dr. Ashley Rath. A lot to think about, and I think she's on point. That you get a say, you get a choice, and the sooner that you can come to that realization that you get a say in this life, and your results are directly correlated to your amount of responsibility. Again, it's a tough pill to swallow. But it's a foundational concept that you certainly need to grab a hold on to. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's do it again next week, shall we? Let's do another one of these. By the way, if you have a compelling story and want to join me on this conversation, shoot me an email, jared@jaredsebestin.com. Make sure you check out Dr. Ashley Rath's book on Amazon. And while you're there, take a look at Life-Undeferred. If you don't have a copy yet, go check it out. Great resources for you to unlock new levels in your year and in your life here for 2025. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us. Love you guys. We'll talk soon.